Hey there, and welcome to the Weapon Refinery Ideas video. In this series we look at the recently announced refines and, well, take a look at each character in depth, thinking about what it might be, what might be best for them in their refinery weapon. It's always nice to see the old characters get stuff because over time characters get better and better, and things like dragon flowers and weapon refines help older characters to stack up against the new threats. It's not always successful, looking at Frederick and some others, but in cases like Base Eliwood, who got access to the Blazing Durandal refine, and Brave Ike, who went from a unit that's not used very much to a unit that almost everyone uses in Ether raids, it could be quite a pivotal thing, quite a turning point. So, this time we've got Myrrh, Draug, Donnel and Clarisse, all units I consider certainly needing of a refine. I mean, most of them are quite decent anyway. The stat spreads aren't too bad, but I think the weapon refine will help them stick out from other similar units that do more or less the same thing. So, without further ado, let's get into this. Okay, first up we have Myrrh, the only 5-star exclusive of this batch. Now, while Myrrh is one of the only flying dragons in the game, she does have a great deal of competition. You see, as a dragon, there aren't too many roles you can fill. Most dragons tend to be mixed bulk enemy phase characters that make use of lightning breath or distant counter to be usually enemy phase tanks. And while Myrrh can do this very well, there are a great deal of other newer dragons that do this better. I only say this because as a 5-star exclusive she costs orbs, and if you're going to spend orbs on a character, you'd probably rather spend them on a character that is better than Myrrh. That being said, being a flyer gives her access to unique builds like this one on the right. Aerobatics and guidance makes the bonds consistent, meaning you can have a mixed bulk of 40-40, while also having a decent speed stat. If the speed isn't enough, you can swap out the bond skill for speed res in the seal or attack speed. This would either sacrifice attack or res depending on which stat you'd rather get rid of. But it does mean that your speed will be more consistent. While that is the case, as a flying dragon, you're still going to be susceptible to archers and falchions or any type of dragon killer, really. So if you're struggling to get by, then IoT Shield is a good option with Distant Counter. The Distant Counter shield set is quite good if you're relying on the AI on your defense teams, since you're not going to be using Myrrh, the AI is. But if Myrrh is in the hands of the player, then the bond skill might be higher performing, since aerobatics and guidance make it so bonds can work on any phase, really. It's easy to set up on enemy phase, but aerobatics makes it quite a potent player phase option too. Bond skills in general are quite decent for flyers, since aerobatics really does make it easier. And of course, as a flyer, she does have that niche of being able to maneuver over any terrain. And of course, with aerobatics and guidance, have some quite good mix-ups of movement. You could do the very same with flyer formation too. As far as the skills she actually comes with, she has no skills at 4-star, so even if she was to demote, she wouldn't actually have anything. But to be honest, Bonfire and Fury are already available at 4-star, and Hone Dragons isn't something you're going to need lots of, unlike the other two skills. If you need Hone Dragons, 20,000 Feather promotion wouldn't be too bad as a one-off anyway, so there isn't too much to say there, but at the same time, you're not missing out on much. As far as a refine goes, Great Flame at base is quite good, since alongside speed you can stop Bold Fighter and Vengeful Fighter from happening. Those could be quite threatening to deal with on their respective phases. If you don't have this, her defense is high enough to make this proc consistent, though that being said, Bold Fighter users are typically, well, always armors, and armor units will typically have high defense points. So whether or not you'd rather go with a defense set in order to make use of Great Flame more, you could. But again, Great Flame's getting a refine, so they may upgrade the base effect so that you only have to have 1 point higher defense. And then as a refine, I'd say they could do so much. They could do aerobatics, guidance. They'd be quite basic. If they wanted to improve Myrrh's usability, IoT Shield would be really handy. Maybe a Dragon Shield, because that isn't a skill we have. And you could then run IoT Shield as well in the seal, and you'd be able to nullify all effective bonuses against you, leaving free still your A, B, and C slots for the build. So there's quite a lot of potential for Myrrh, and hopefully she'll get something that helps her stick out a little bit more from what already exists in the game. But she's already a solid unit, so it'll be interesting to see what they do with her and her weapon. Next up we have Draug. Now, much like Gwendolyn, he's in a bit of a unique position as one of the only free-to-play armor units available. He's also one of the only armor units that has the speed to run Special Fighter. All too often a new armor unit's introduced and they're just a slow, high attack unit with plenty of defense and res, but they can't run Special Fighter. And Special Fighter's really what you want to aim for as an armor unit, for two reasons. One, it's probably the most powerful, in my opinion, combination for an armor unit to have, since it doesn't only work on player or enemy phase. It's quite easy to use on either phase, but also because it really does separate you from other armor units that are only really able to run the other skills. Wary Fighter's quite restrictive, but works well on characters like Surtur in those scenarios, but Bold and Vengeful, while really good on other units that are slow, mostly really do lock you to either player or enemy phase. But Special Fighter's really good because it's guard and both phased breath, special cooldown effect on both phases. You naturally double, which means null follow-up doesn't hurt you, and you also naturally prevent follow-ups, which makes other units less threatening. It also increases your bulk since you're not getting hit twice. So naturally it's a really powerful skill. This is quite a standard Special Fighter build because you get hit back, proc ether. It's not particularly special. I use it on Winter Robin. It's really good for Special Fighter sets. The only problem is his speed's a little bit shaky. Not to the point where it's unusable, but it's not as consistent as other army units that are a bit faster. This can be solved with a speed-related bond skill, much like Myrrh, to make the speed more consistent if you need it. But the speed is more or less high enough here. But if you're relying more on enemy phase, then you might want a little bit more speed, given that a lot of speed boosting skills are player phase. So when they're attacking you, they'll get more speed than they would if you're attacking them. So yeah, that's why I went with that build. It'd be nice to see him get a refine that works with Special Fighter. Gwendolyn's didn't quite work with Special Fighter that amazingly well, but it did give her a unique combination with either Bold or Vengeful that works on either phase, so there is that. But for Draug, it would be nice to see him get a slaying effect, or maybe even something with Brave Sword that works with Special Fighter. That'd be really interesting to see. Something like a guaranteed follow-up, though Arden would probably get that instead, although he has it in his B skill, so maybe Draug could get something. Something that boosts his speed enough that Brave Sword would actually work with Special Fighter. It'd be quite good. All these sort of things. As far as what he comes with Brave Sword, as you can see. Everything else is 4-star available. Power Vis isn't that useful, but Lunge and Ward Armor can be. Lunge is good for Fire Sweep setups in Ether Raid defenses, since you can set up traps with Lunge. And Ward Armor is really fun with Armor Balls, where you put loads of armor units together, and they all have Ward Armor, and then all of them are really hard to damage. So those are quite fun. He's readily available at 3 and 4-star, which makes all these skills easily acquirable. Overall, he's just a solid unit, really. The Pref weapon is really all he needed to just give him that little bit of a boost to keep up with those newer units. But overall, I feel like he's going to get something quite nice. Hopefully something that works with Special Fighter. Next we have the Donnel. Donnel is a great unit. He's always been quite versatile. It's quite hard to build Donnel wrong, since he's got good mixed bulk. He's actually got a rather salvageable speed stat. The Brave Lance on the left build kind of gives the impression his speed's quite low, but base 29 speed is workable on especially infantry melee units, since there's quite a lot of skills at his disposal that he can actually use really well. As far as competition goes, there isn't actually as much as you'd think. Lance infantry units were more saturated in the first year than any other year. We've barely had any Lance infantry units over the years. We had Shiro, we had Dancing Berkut, Fjorm, and Duo Ephraim Leon. But apart from them, I don't think there's anyone else. It really is that infrequent. And because of this, Donnel's role hasn't really been taken away or replaced. Since while units like Duo Ephraim Leon have been introduced, that's a 5-star exclusive that doesn't even appear at a normal amount of times. As a duo unit, it's unlikely he'll come back more than a few times a year, and even then he costs orbs. Donnel is a 3 and 4-star unit, and as one of the only free-to-play infantry lances, he is rather good. Brave Lucina is a good support unit, but Donnel can be equally good, perhaps even better at mixed bulk than Lucina. He also has access to the 10 flowers. He's getting his own pref now, and in fact he could be used alongside Brave Lucina, like this build on the right. So yeah, about the build itself. Again, there's so much you can do with Donnel. Little tweaks and changes that keep the same idea, but maybe improve it. The idea here is to use Brave Lucina support to give him the breath effect, or the special cooldown bonus. So he gets hits back, procs ether, and the special spiral makes it so after that he only needs to get hit once and he'll proc ether in every fight after he's been hit just once. If you don't have Brave Lucina, this build still works. You just swap out ether for something like Soul or Bonfire. You could go with Iceberg, but Bonfire will do more damage typically. But as a 3 cooldown, it would go down to 2, meaning every time you proc it, Special Spiral will put it down to being ready again, so you can just keep using it. You could also go with a 4 cooldown special, since with the Slaying Lance it will go to 3, Special Spiral put it down to 1, meaning that with a 3 cooldown special you'll be able to proc it consistently every time you're hit, even without Brave Lucina. Attack Smoke helps when tanking multiple enemies at once. Swift Stance helps give you that extra speed on enemy phase, since this is predominantly an enemy phase build. He can also run mixed phase, player phase. Donnel is just a really good unit. I'll be interested to see what they do for his refine. Looking at the skills he comes with player phase base skills. So working on the fact that IS tend to give characters weapons that work with their base kit, not necessarily what the character's used for, which is a shame. We'll probably see a Brave Lance type weapon, maybe with less restrictions, kind of like Cordelia's refine, which was quite good. Looking at his weapons, he has the Brave Lance plus at 5-star, and then everything else here is available at 4 and 3-star. Drag back is not quite as useful as lunge on Draug, but it can still be used. HP plus 5 is not particularly great unless you're using Aversa or Virion, but it still can be good. And then reciprocal aid is situational and preference. So if you like using reciprocal aid, there it is. Again, he's a launch unit like Draug. He's not going to come with very much. So at least everything's available at 4-star. So yeah, quite good fodder. So yeah, I've pretty much covered everything already, but seeing him get a refine that is even better, makes him even better than he already is, would be quite nice. But he's already quite good. Now, last but not least, we have Clarisse. Now, out of all 4 units, this would be the unit I'd say needed a refine the most. Now, power creep isn't nearly as common in this game as people seem to make it out to be, but Clarisse is a prime example of a unit that has been completely replaced and outclassed. You see, Fallen Takumi has an identical stat spread to Clarisse in every way, but he has 4 more res and a pref weapon. So until this refine comes out, there is quite literally zero reason to use Clarisse at all. They're both colourless, they're both infantry, they both have the same HP attack speed, def as each other, but Takumi has 4 more res and a pref. So there's not much to be said there. As far as what she actually comes with, she does come with a thing called Clarisse's bow, but it is an inheritable weapon. It's not particularly great. It is usable. It's attack speed smoke, a -5 debuff, which can be useful in combo with other smoke skills. But if I'm being honest, if you want to use debuffers, daggers can be the best choice for that, since most daggers, or all now, mostly have a def res smoke built in, so it's not the most useful bow. It's not aged very well. Glimmer and Poison Strike are both available at 4-star. Threat and Def is 5-star locked. Threat and Def's really good for brave bows, since you wait for them to approach and then you debuff their def, which essentially gives you 14 extra damage on a brave weapon. It's quite useful. Poison Strike's good for fire sweep sets, especially Brave Lyn with a fire sweep bow. And Glimmer is available on many units anyway. I mean, all these skills here besides the bow are available on other units, so you won't necessarily need to get rid of your Clarisse for these skills. But each skill has its uses. Glimmer's good on Blade Tomes, since it's low cooldown and stacks with the high damage output Blade Tomes have. So if I was going to say anything about Glimmer, that would be it. Moving on to the actual build that I went with, you can do a lot with Clarisse. You could do Brave Bow, but if you're going to do Brave Bow, just use Jamke. He's better. His stat spread's better for Brave Bow builds in general. So I went with an enemy phase build, since she's got relatively decent bulk. I believe the res bond matches her def and res to each other, so she'll have equal bulk, which is good when fighting dragons or other units that adaptive damage to def or res. Special Spiral, in the same way that Donnel's worked, the slaying effect with Ether makes 4 cooldown. With Brave Lucina that can be procced, and then with Special Spiral you'll be able to proc Ether every time you get hit in combat. So it's quite useful. And also, much like Donnel, if Ether is not usable because you don't have Brave Lucina, you can swap it out for Soul or Bonfire. You could also use Iceberg for the same damage, but with Iceberg you're relying on attack res bond being active for the most damage, whereas with Bonfire, of course, you don't need anything. It's just already 29. So I'd take Bonfire over Iceberg in that sense. Attack Smoke, once again, like Donnel, it's a very similar build to Donnel in a way. In fact, I think it's almost identical. But it is quite useful for a unit like this until they get their pref. In which case, who knows what she'll get. She may get Attack Speed Smoke, but it's 7 as a debuff. And then on top of that refined, she might get the dagger effect of def res -7 to foes, which should make her quite good for debuff teams, but we just don't know yet. She could also get like a supreme poison strike that works with her poison strike already. There's a lot that could happen with her, so I think they'll definitely work off of that debuff poison strike type of thing. She does have threat and def, so they may not choose to put the def res debuff smoke on the weapon, but we'll just have to wait and see on that. She has enough speed. She gets 47 with a buff. That's perfectly fine. You don't need any more or less than that. 47 doubles all the units you need to double, but if they are faster than you, you'll typically one-shot them with Ether anyway, so there isn't much of a problem. Winter Sothis, just like other units I've mentioned before, you may not even want to fight Winter Sothis with Clarisse, or even bother trying. So there's no point boosting your speed to 60 in hope that you'll double, because even if you double, you're just not going to do very well. you know, you can boost speed all you want, but sometimes it's just not worth the effort with some units. But yeah, that's all I really have to say about Clarisse. Hopefully her weapon will give her something that puts her above Fallen Takumi. And thankfully, since his weapon isn't that great, it shouldn't be too hard to do that. Well, that's about all I have to say for this batch of heroes. I do hope you found the video useful or helpful in some way, whether it be with builds or just showing you what older characters can still do, or maybe giving you some ideas on what you might hope the Refine to be, because all these units could very much use a good pref weapon, and it's exciting to see what they might get, because it is in many ways a make or break for some of these characters. Mostly looking at Clarisse here. They need something that will help them stick out, not because they're completely outclassed or bad, but it's just something that helps them be a bit more individual and not have stuff that other characters can replicate either better or just as well. Give something that they can do. But yeah, with all that said and done, I wish you the best of luck on any summons this month, and I will see you all in the next video. Have a good one, guys.